Hi everybody, I'm Aidan and this is Katie. We're dialing in from Optimal Workshop and it's awesome to have you joining us today. Today we're going to be taking you through a bit about benchmarking your information architecture using our tool Treejack. As mentioned, my name's Aidan. I'm what's called a product coach here at Optimal Workshop and I'm based here in Wellington, New Zealand. Originally, this session was going to be a collaboration between myself and my colleague Alex Doggett, who's from our frontline support faculty, but substituting in for her is my co-product coach, Katie Burdock. Hey, Katie, thanks for joining.
Hi, Aidan. Thanks for having me and happy to step in today.
No worries. And yeah, Katie is, of course, based in Ireland, so you're getting a bunch of different accents today. Do feel free to chime in the comments where you're dialing in from. And also, if you have any questions along the way, we'd be glad to hear them. Cool. So kicking right into it, just a brief overview of the Optimal Workshop platform itself. Optimal Workshop is quite well known for, I suppose, our card sorting tool and our tree testing tool in particular. But we're actually a user research platform with 5 tools in one. So we offer research tools to support methods such as mentioned, card sorting, tree testing, qualitative research in the form of qualitative note-taking and analysis, surveys, first-click testing, and we also actually have a participant recruitment service available too. Today, though, we're going to be discussing Treejack and specifically benchmarking your information architecture with Treejack. Put simply, Treejack is going to help you evaluate where and why people are getting lost in your content and fix it. So really, it'll help you drill down into, are people able to navigate to where they need to go to complete the task that they need to complete. Right now, I'm going to throw it over to Katie to show you what this looks like for a participant. Katie, over to you.
Thanks, Aidan. Hopefully everyone can see my screen there. And what this presents is the view of a study from a participant's experience. Our studies all include some templates that you can use, such as our welcome messaging that you can personalize down to the length that the study might take to complete, and what you're trying to achieve out of your tree test. And again, all of these instructions are standard templates that can be fully customizable. But as a participant is invited into your study, you can also add some pre-study or pre-screening questions, which I don't have included here. So we've jumped straight into the tasks, and you can see I just have 3 tasks included in this study. So the first question, and it's all based around a furniture website that most people will be probably familiar with. But the first task that we've asked the participants is, what option of wardrobe would you select if you had limited space for door openings? So they simply select Start Task, and they're presented with almost like a white label version of your information architecture. You can have, I think, up to 4,000 nodes as part of your tree test. Hopefully you don't be doing tree tests that are that large, and we'd recommend to break it down into smaller taxonomies. But you can see here, this furniture might represent your home page, but wardrobes is labeled quite clearly. So as a participant, I might click into wardrobes, and as a participant, I might suggest sliding wardrobes as where I'd hope to find the information I'm looking for. So the second task will load, and this is where would I find a chair for gaming. So again, I'll start the task, and I might click into gaming furniture, and straight into chairs. So nice and simple. And the next task then, the last final one, is I need chairs that can be stacked together for easy storage. So again, I'll start the task. I might click into furniture sets, maybe desks and chairs, but there's nothing really there about stacking chairs. So what's great as well is they can go back in their navigation if they're unsure. So I'll go straight back to the home page of furniture, maybe click into chairs, maybe bar stools, and I'll select that as a nominated answer. And also as to pre-screening questions, you can ask post-study questions. So this is just how often do you shop in IKEA, if you haven't guessed by now. But I'll select 3 to 4 times per year and click submit. And once finished, you again can customize any of these thank you messages, add redirect links to direct customers back to your website or your app or wherever they need to be. But that's the participant experience for now. And then shortly we'll jump into the actual analysis of this study, and I'll hand you back to Aidan.
Awesome. Thanks heaps, Katie. Yeah, it's awesome to see the participant experience. Essentially, it's great to be able to, I guess, conduct lots of unmoderated individual participant responses within Treejack, and then start to see a bit of an aggregate view of the aggregate paths people have taken once you start getting to maybe 40 or 50 people participating in the study. So thanks heaps for that, Katie, and we'll delve into those results later on. But bringing it back to benchmarking, just wanted to, I guess, speak to what is benchmarking so that we all have a shared understanding here today. So really, benchmarking is evaluating an experience by using metrics to actually gauge its relative performance against a meaningful standard. So in the context of using Treejack, this looks like conducting an initial Treejack study to serve as a control, to serve as a bit of a litmus test on how your experience is performing currently. From here, you can then actually create a second study using the same tasks, but so that the tasks are all consistent, but using a different tree structure. So providing people with a different sitemap or a different flow to click through. And ultimately, you'll then be able to compare and contrast the results of each of those studies and see how you've improved by making those changes, or perhaps whether there's been any improvement at all. You'll be able to see this in Treejack. And then from here, you don't just have to stop at an A/B test. You can actually look to iterate further and make additional quick edits off the back of seeing some really tangible insights from your Treejack analysis. So this allows you to really iterate quickly, and over the space of weeks or a month, you can actually really improve the, I guess, navigation and accessibility of various pieces of content within your website. So the value of benchmarking really comes in a few different types of ways. Firstly, of course, getting that finger on the pulse, getting that understanding of how the site structure is currently performing. Is it performing as we expect? Is it performing in a way that we're comfortable with, or does it need attention? As well as this, if it does need attention and things are subpar, what aspects of the site structure are actually in need of attention? What forks in the road are sending people astray? What labels are people not quite understanding that's causing them to maybe click back or click around? We can start to see some of the answers to these questions in Treejack analysis. And also, is the new site structure that we're proposing better than the existing one or a previous one? We're actually, through benchmarking, able to really see what progress we've made. If you're not doing any benchmarking and you're just rolling out some changes based on some hunches, this is a very risky, I guess, tactic to have to not have that data-led informed decision making. So really being able to compare and contrast along the way will allow you to share with your stakeholders and roll out changes with a lot of confidence. Cool. So let's now look at when should we benchmark and what usually prompts benchmarking in our everyday lives. So first of all, when conducting research, quite commonly people will do benchmarking as part of monitoring or regular testing for the maintenance of a specific experience, making sure that there's a continuous finger on the pulse, I guess, to use that analogy earlier, and a continuous understanding of whether people are actually able to complete the task that they need to when given our taxonomy or given our sitemap. So that continuous maintenance is one way or one prompt for people to benchmark. Another prompt is when a resolution is needed, when there's a request for a fix, maybe from a stakeholder who says that the hit rate on their part of the site, on their features, is quite low. Or maybe there's some customer feedback that completing a certain task, such as signing up, has a lot of friction and a lot of pain associated with it. This might then prompt some benchmarking and a rejig of your specific navigation. And also when rebuilding, so when taking on those more large-scale tasks, such as maybe content migration or rebranding or maybe merging of products, this will also require some benchmarking involved in that too. It's noteworthy here that resolving and rebuilding are really reactive in terms of initiatives, and benchmarking off the back of this is really playing catch-up. Compared to monitoring, where essentially you're able to have a continuous understanding to the point that you're actually avoiding the need to resolve or avoiding the need to fix anything, avoiding putting pain points upon your users through monitoring and snuffing out those fires before they even happen. Also, it means that when it comes to those large-scale projects, if you've done continuous maintenance, you have a lot more sound understanding of what parts of your site might need the most attention as part of that sizable change. Cool. I'm now going to throw it back over to Katie, who's going to show us through some of the results from that earlier study. Katie.
Okay, thanks, Aidan. So yeah, here we're back in app and we're having a look at the results and the analysis of that particular study that you see me take part as a participant. So you straight away, when you come into your results page, you just see a brief overview of your study. So you can see 37 out of 39 of our participants completed their study, 2 abandoned, and the average time taken and the location, which can be quite important for the likes of IKEA that may need to test in the multiple markets that they are currently trading in. And it also gives you just an overview or analysis or a summary of your task. So we have an average success rate of 70%, which I think is quite good, and a directness score, which we'll jump into explaining that a little bit further. And we almost use like a traffic light system in terms of some of our graphs, in terms of green for success and red for failure. And you can see here our third task, we have quite a high failure rate. So we'll jump a little bit further into that one. So straight into the analysis, and you always start with our participants tab. And here you can drill down into each individual participant to see exactly how they got on and the average time taken. And you can also decide to exclude some participants, maybe based on their success rate. If someone failed all the tasks, you might want to decide to exclude those, maybe based on their time taken. And you can also filter individually by any of the questions that you ask, so whether they were pre-study, post-study questions, or pre-screening questions. So I might only want to look at the analysis of the people who love shopping in IKEA and they've gone 3 to 4 times a year. And by selecting this filter button, it has now updated all of my analysis that we're going to jump into to just these 11 participants. But I do want to look at everybody. So for now, I'm just going to remove that filter. So straight into our task results. So each task, you'll see this kind of pie chart and you'll see a couple of different colors there. So our first task, which was about finding a chair for gaming. What's great about tree testing as well is that you can nominate what's more than the one correct answer, which is often the case when it comes to your website, and that information can be hosted in more than the one location. And here on this website, we have 3 potential answers or correct labels for our participants to select. And you can see 91% of people succeeded with this task, but you'll see a reference of a direct and an indirect success. And what an indirect success means is that people may have discovered as they were going through the tree test that they were heading down the wrong path, and they backtracked in their navigation to eventually select the correct answer. And it's the same with a failure of direct and an indirect failure. So someone may have navigated up the tree and tried to correct their path, but unfortunately still selected the incorrect answer for an indirect failure. But it's quite important just to understand that kind of paths are the journeys that each of your participants have selected and where exactly they're getting lost. But to really understand maybe some of the journeys that people are taking, maybe if I select into this pie, we have this option of what we class as our pie tree. And each of the pie tree kind of shows you the ticker of each branch represents the paths that all of your participants have visited. So nearly all of our participants selected into our chair category, which is really important. So they did land there. But from there, they may have kind of gone a little bit long, and you can see all the various different labels that were selected as or nominated as correct answers. And sometimes with this blue, this means that they kind of went back on their answer, or anything in yellow is what they actually nominated as a correct answer. But we'll be able to dive a little bit further into that. I'll just pause that there. And what's great then about with the tasks, and as Aidan mentioned about maybe when benchmarking, you have to do maybe an A/B test, maybe A, B, C, D, and the various iterations that you need to test based on the analysis of your first or second study, is that you can actually compare tasks between the various tree tests that you might have done. So I have a second version of this study here, and I'm then able to compare the task, and I'll compare the exact same task. And now you can see an on-screen literally split of each of the tasks across your two studies. So you can see in the current study we're looking at, we've had a much higher success rate. And you can see it's kind of changing the score here on the other iteration of the task that we've had. And you can see even compare the various paths that each of your participants have explored in the 2 versions of this tree test. And again, you can also compare the pie trees side by side. So this is a really useful comparison tool when you have ran more than the one test. And again, all of this can be fully downloaded and shared with any stakeholders that mightn't have direct access to your study. But to dive a little bit further into maybe some of the results is if we click into our first click test, our first click analysis, and this basically shows you each label that the participants first clicked into. And again, if we look at task 3 that I mentioned had the high failure rate, 94% of our participants landed in the correct section of chairs. So where did they go wrong? So a bit further again is that if we click into the path section of our analysis, and again, I'll jump straight to task 3, because I really want to see what happened here and what went wrong. And you can also filter your results maybe by the successes or the failures. And for now, we're just going to have a look at all of our failure rates. So here we have all of our failures. And again, it just gives you a little summary of what you nominated as the correct answers. So of the 35 participants, I think 19 people failed. But of the 19 failures, 17 of our 19 participants all got to that correct area of chairs. But it's just interesting of where they went wrong. And you can see here the summary of the indirect failure of where the people really tried and they navigated back to chairs on 2 other occasions, but unfortunately still nominated the incorrect answer. And then to really compare some of the destinations or the majority of destinations that your participants have landed, this tab here just kind of shows you a summary of each of your 3 tasks. So for example, where people would have to try find a gaming chair, children's desk chairs was also nominated as a correct answer, but nobody selected that. Most of our participants either selected gaming chairs or scrolled all the way down to the bottom, or actual gaming chairs that we had under the gaming furniture task. But in task 3, 13 of our participants selected bar stools and chairs, and the actual correct nominated answer we had was stools. And looking at the analysis of this is that stools is hidden as a node a little bit under stools and benches. So it might be that clear in terms of the navigation of where people were due to select. And you can see lots of people select bar stools and chairs. And if you remember from the overview of our analysis, the majority of our participants were also based in the Netherlands, where English is not the first language, and stackable chairs might be referred to as bar stools there. So that's where when there's multiple markets maybe involved in your company, you have to take that on board. And hey, for the Dutch market, that might be a correct answer. And lastly, what you can do is you can download all of your analysis and share any of this. And the sharing tab too, you can choose what part of your analysis that you might want to share with some of your stakeholders. And literally a URL link is generated that you can copy and paste out, pop it in an email and share with some of your stakeholders. But that's the analysis in app of a Treejack study, and I'll pass you back to Aidan.
Awesome. Thanks heaps, Katie. Yeah, it was awesome to see that. Just by running that one study, you've already got a very good bit of insight into what's working well and what maybe needs some attention. So it's awesome to hear. Thank you for that. And so, yeah, now we're going to jump into some tips and tricks when it comes to setting up your Treejack study to really get the in-depth insights that you're looking for. So firstly, it's really key to optimize your tasks. So it's really key to, I guess, create tasks that represent the specific, I guess, key content that your users are going to need to navigate to. So this is the content that's going to be reflecting your key products or the key services that people are going to need to complete as part of interacting with your business. So really, I guess, really crystal clear to make that, I suppose, the most important part of your tasks. Also, it's important to only set usually a maximum of around 10 tasks, and this is for a couple of different reasons. Firstly, it's important to, I guess, minimize that cognitive load that participants have. Once participants go beyond 10 tasks, they can start maybe skimming through and not paying as much attention. But the main reason is actually because we want to make sure that people aren't getting too familiar with your tree structure. So we don't want people, I guess, knowing where the answer is and clicking directly through to it just because they saw that when they answered an earlier task or earlier question. So that's another reason to keep your tasks to a minimum for each study. And when writing tasks, it's really important as well to use a really clear sort of direct approach within your prompts. So setting the scene with a scenario in one sentence and then a prompt in the second sentence can be a great way to go. A simple example of this would be you're looking to buy a toothbrush. Where would you go to purchase this? And very clearly the participants know exactly what they need to be completing. So that's some advice there on optimizing your tasks. Also, it's really important to deepen your data set and actually get more insights than just the metrics that we've talked about so far with the Treejack analysis. So Katie mentioned there that you can actually use pre-study questions and also post-study questions to capture different information. You can ask a variety of questions as pre- and post-study questions, but in particular, some good ways to use pre-study questions could be capturing demographics, asking people about their age or their, I guess, frequency of completing a certain task or behavior, such as Katie had with how frequently do you shop at this store. This can then be used in filtering, so it can be a great way to compare maybe different personas that you may be looking to actually segment during your analysis. And post-study questions can be used for that discovery of asking people what made sense to them, what didn't make sense to them, what they thought in general, what some of their pain points and frustrations were. And also you can actually get additional data points for benchmarking within pre or post-study questions too. So you might want to actually add a scale question type to gauge people's confidence levels, specifically with maybe finding the content they're looking for at the moment. And that way you could maybe compare their confidence level on a scale of 1 to 10 with your first benchmark study, and then also compare their confidence level for your latest iterations as you go down the line. That way you've got these sort of direct feedback points from your customers, as well as the Treejack metrics that we've been showing you through. You can also ask other question types such as NPS scores in these surveys as well. So that's another way to go. Cool. So wrapping up for today, it's a nice, short, sharp session for us all. And do feel free to share any questions that you've got. We'll be sticking around to answer some of those questions too. But some key takeaways for today. The first key takeaway is really, if you don't have recent reliable data on the performance of your navigation, it's probably time to benchmark. Let's get that finger on the pulse. Let's have that really sound understanding of what our users are behaving like when they're shown our sitemap and needing to navigate through it, particularly when it comes to those key tasks that I mentioned that are really making our business keep ticking over. So really key to have that data to really draw upon. Also, Treejack can be used to make those informed decisions really quickly and iteratively. A lot of people will actually maybe get stuck in decision paralysis or stuck with back and forth with stakeholders, when in reality we can go and make an informed decision by running a quick Treejack study and getting those data points to then speak to and inform further decisions. Katie mentioned A/B testing and even ABCD testing, as is a fun term there too. And it may seem quite overwhelming to think, oh, I've got to do a lot of these iterations. But in reality, if you can jump into Treejack, have some quick takeaways, some quick insights from the analysis in Treejack, you can then go and quickly run a new study very, very promptly and get some timely insights once again. And over the course of a couple of weeks or a month or so, you'll surprise yourself with just how much you've been able to change and track the change. And finally, regularly benchmarking your navigation to monitor its performance in a proactive way is going to really set you up for success when it comes to having the interests of users really central to the actions that you and your team are undertaking, and being able to ultimately curate and cater that digital experience that we're all custodians of, to be really supporting your users and having a real seamless experience, particularly when it comes to navigating and finding the content that they're looking for. Awesome. So that wraps us up for today. We're going to throw it over to some questions. I was having a look at the chat earlier, and it was awesome to see people dialing in from so many different places. It looks like we've had a question here. How did Katie get the comparison of the results from 2 different studies to come up? Katie, might you like to maybe reshare your screen and show Lorinda through how that works?
Sure. So what I've done there, Lorinda, is I'm under the results and analysis, and if you go into the task results, and as you're reviewing each task, you'll see a button under here called compare tasks. So I just click this, and the screen on the right or before you start comparing will always be blank. So up the top, you have to pick what other study you want to compare to. So here I just picked another study that I had called Furniture Treejack Test 1. And then you have to select your task. So you can compare the exact same task, or you can pick a completely different task. So I might just pick this one, for example, and it brings you up the different results, and then you can compare on screen side by side. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, so that's a really great way to go for that comparison. Essentially, you just have to have 2 Treejack studies, and you'll be able to select which specific Treejack study you're comparing for within that drop-down option. Thanks, Katie. Awesome. Next question here is, how do you ask NPS scores? Very, very simply, NPS scores can be added in within the questionnaire tab of study setup. So specifically, when you're in a questionnaire tab, you can actually add some pre or post study questions, as we mentioned, and there's about 8 different question types to choose from. So when you're doing that, you can actually select the NPS question type, and then you'll be able to add that in, and that's the nice and simple way to add your NPS score question. Hope that helps on that one. Cool. We'll see if there's any other questions floating in. And no worries at all, Lauren. Yeah, I think I suppose we'll probably wrap up for today. It's been absolutely great to have you all and have you all joining us today. And yeah, we'll see you next week for another session sharing you through something that's to be determined. So watch this space. We'll be coming back onto your LinkedIn screens or your YouTube screens, wherever you're finding us very shortly. But thanks again for joining me today, Katie, especially at short notice.
Thanks, Aidan. And for anyone in the States, enjoy your Thanksgiving holidays too. And hopefully we'll see you next week.
Most definitely. Thanks for joining us, team. Take care.
Bye.